So our media just once again betrayed their incredible bias. Our story today is a bit of a wild one, and it's actually a little scary, and it actually does play into a historical fact that I'll give you guys in a second. But yeah, there's well, it's weird. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So I was tagged in this post by Howard Feldman, who wrote on Friday afternoon ahead of Shabbat, the Johannesburg Jewish community went into crisis mode when two IEDs were found across from a school, synagogue, and kosher supermarket. I hosted an emergency security broadcast last night on Chain FM to update the community. Many thousands listened, zero coverage in South African media. Of course, the South African media would not cover anything to do with Jews being treated badly because the South African media belongs to the government. Our government, in spite of the fact that South Africa is majority Christian, has sort of allied itself with Islamic terrorist states around the world. You'll note that the South African government has said nary a word about the literal Christian genocide that is happening in Nigeria, with tens of thousands of Christians murdered every single year purely because they are Christian. These Muslims in Nigeria aren't fighting a war. They're not fighting Hamas. They're not fighting a terrorist sect. They're simply killing Christians because they are Christians. And no one is saying anything. The media in South Africa, crickets. The leaders of South Africa, crickets. But when Israel amounts what can only be described as the most unsuccessful genocide in the history of the world, Genghis Khan was more successful on horseback. When Israel engages in this highly unsuccessful genocide, because after 2 years of bombing one of the most densely populated areas in the world, Israel had managed to kill a grand total of around 60,000 of the couple of million Gazans who actually live in Gaza. But after that, our media is filled with reports about how evil Israel is, how innocent the Palestinians are, in spite of the fact that on October the 8th, I don't remember a single innocent Gazan civilian not celebrating what Hamas had just done, which sort of, in my opinion, if the South African government were to invade Zimbabwe and kill, I don't know, a couple of thousand civilians and rape and murder and pillage and cut off heads and film themselves doing it, I would not be celebrating what the South African government had just done. I would be like, what the hell is that? Right? So that would make me innocent. If I were to celebrate it, I don't know. It just doesn't sit right with me. But anyways, of course, we're not writing about this in a Christian country where 85% of Christians or of the population purport at least to be Christian. We're not writing about it. But Islam, that's a whole different story. So I had to go to Grok because I could literally not find a single bit of information on this. And I just asked Grok, is this true? And is there any sources that you can actually give me? And Grok appears to think that it might be, at least the post is at least related to actual verifiable sources, right? There's something going on in the Jewish community because you have the Glen Hazel community Facebook group that actually posted about this and wrote about this, right? You have Howard Feldman himself that discussed this on radio, and this was an actual radio broadcast, and it does appear as if actually thousands tuned in to listen. And you have the SA Jewish report, who didn't mention the IEDs, but did mention that there are rising tensions within the Jewish community in Johannesburg, specifically the community of Glen Hazel. So that's sort of it, right? None of the media, who is supposed to be the truth finders of South Africa, actually made any mention of any of this. What they did do, however, was talk about this interfaith horror show that happened in Cape Town and how Francesca Albanese, a woman that is so painfully average that it will make your head spin. Trust me, listening to this woman speak, the only people who can like her are leftists who don't have their priorities straight at the best of times, right? Because Francesca basically just says, Israel bad. And then the leftists go, yeah, Israel bad. In spite of the fact that if all of the things that leftists hold true, right? So leftists love gays. They love killing babies. Of course, I think Hamas likes that too. So never mind. You and Hamas at least have that in common. Hamas would kill as many babies as you could possibly find, right? So in on that front, Islam doesn't really bother too much. But gays, oh yeah, Islam loves gays, specifically off of roofs to see who would hit the ground first, gay one or gay two. That's literally what happens in gay communities, or at least in majority, not gay communities, in majority Islamic countries. And the reason Islam does this is they find it to be a mercy. You see, because if you're homosexual, it makes Allah so angry that you have to kill the homosexual in order to spare them from the incumbent wrath that would come from Allah. This is why in a lot of Muslim countries, men who are gay are oftentimes forced to change their gender because Islam has no specific rules on gender changing. So if you're going to be a gay man, you may as well just become a woman and then you're fine. So, leftists sort of find that to be, oh, but look at all these Muslim countries where it's fine for transgenders. They're even more, I think, accepting of transgenderism than the left that is already way too accepting than what we should be. And that's only because they force it, right? Being a gay man is a quick ticket down to, I don't know, meet your maker. Being a trans person or a confused man pretending to be a woman, that's okay. But of course, the left doesn't care about that because the left has no actual principles or standards or anything like that. They just sort of go wherever they need to go. So, my one big problem with this church is that they hosted an interfaith session where people from various different faiths was invited, imams from Islam and Hindu and all the other faiths, to speak at this church. That's a big issue. That church is defiled, that church is evil, and it is not a Christian church. So when Renee says that Christians who are for Palestine or Christians from the USA or any place like that, your Christianity is incompatible with Jesus, Renee, you don't know Jesus. You have no idea who Jesus is. I'm assuming your church is probably one of those that preaches that homosexuality is perfectly fine and that Jesus loves the queers. I'm sure you have pride flags all over your church. The fact of the matter is that you are a prophet of Satan. You don't know who Jesus is. So when you're going to try and preach to me about what would or would not be compatible with Jesus, I'm sorry, but you have no authority here. You have no right to speak on anything. Now, there's a debate whether or not a female can even be a pastor in a church. And I will tell you, I am not in favor of that. But I know plenty of Christians who are, even in my own church, who holds the view that females cannot be pastors. There are plenty of congregants who actually don't agree with that, who think, no, women should probably be allowed to be pastors. So, the room can be split on that issue, and that's fine. The interfaith thing, you wouldn't find a single true Christian who would ever argue that holding or hosting interfaith conventions at a church is anything that should or could ever be allowed. It is the mark of a false and fake church. But of course, that's what our media writes about. The truth is that if this story is real, if this has actually happened, we are going into a very dangerous period of time. People far smarter than me who have studied the expansion of Islam from the very beginnings of Islam when Muhammad sat in a cave and pretended to get word from God, uh, Islam does something very interesting. When Islam is below 2% of the population, they play the victim. The second they get between 2 and 4% of the population, they start with incursions. They start attacking, terrorist attacks all over the place. You'll oftentimes find stuff like acid attacks or suicide bombings. These things become sort of commonplace. They become a disruptive force within the society. And when they get 5%, you can expect a massive amount of violence from Islam. Now, is that all Muslims? No, of course not. Some of my favorite people that I literally buy vaping products from, for example, is a Muslim and he's a super cool dude. I don't hate him. He doesn't hate me. We get along just fine. But Islam as a religion, as an entity, has a problem with living in a country that isn't Islamic. And one of the big reasons for that is, one of the big ones is 12er Islam. Twelver Shia, I guess I should really call it. Twelver Shia is a specific sect within Shia Islam that believes that the paradise can only come once every single non Muslim has either been murdered, made to submit, or converted to Islam. So they have to kill in order to bring about paradise. This is why Muslim extremism isn't allowed in places like Saudi Arabia anymore, why they're cracking down on any and all kinds of extremism, because they understand that once you allow the extremist elements of Islam to take root in your society, you have hell coming your way. Because there might be many good imams, but there are just as many imams that are literally training the next generation of terrorists. And that is very, very dangerous. The South African government has spent, I would say, the last at least decade and a half playing into the hands of the most fundamentalist, extremist societies on earth. And I can't help but say or think that we're in for a lot more of this as hatred for Jews are increasing and it becomes super clear that the South African government has no problem with people being openly anti Jewish. I think we're in for a very wild ride. I mean, you have universities that are banning Jews from their universities, banning their universities from cooperating or working with Jewish institutions. And this is not a problem, at least not in South Africa. Our government has said nothing. But if you're anti Muslim, if you were to shut your door to Iran or to any of the Muslim countries, I'm pretty sure our government would be first in line to attack. There's something weird going on, and I don't quite understand what. As always, hit the like if you like, the dislike if you didn't. Let me know in the comment section down below what you make of this story. It's a pretty scary one, and I really hope that it isn't going to get worse. Massive shout out and thank you to all of the patrons as well as the YouTube channel members. By supporting this channel, you allow me to eventually get actual investigative journalists and researchers and all the rest of it so that I can grow this into a media outlet that actually covers stories like this, stories that actually matter. So if you want to be a part of that, please consider becoming a supporter. As always, be good to each other, be kind to each other, and I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.